Hello, everyone. So, welcome on board. I'm sure it's a long day and you all have been enjoying the session so far. So, last year, when we met over here at the summit, I believe we are at a different maturity level of how we were embracing AI and how we were seeing the future coming out of it. And today, I will start my session with just a small showreel over here. Harsh, if you can play it for us. Believe it or not, it's bad.
That's nice. It occurs to me we should have done that when we were standing. So cancel.
So, we all have come a long way out over here, and as we all embrace AI, every one of you over here represent a different function into your all enterprises, and you all have responsibility at large. I'm sure when you're representing your enterprises, it's not you only. People who are behind you, who are not able to attend to the summit today, I believe this voice can actually navigate across your enterprise, across your business functions, and then you can actually bring them to the speed to what you've seen over here. As magic, I believe all of you started seeing in the morning how we presented out who we are. Who we are as a company, we help you build learning products. We help you build learning platforms. And many of our customers, many of our partners like you, look on to us on seeing how you can outsource your work to us. Outsource in terms of adding scale, adding time efficiencies, and building operational excellence. Because ultimately, every one of you have a chart in your enterprise to get ROI, return on investment. We talk about these things, and with today my topic on AI operational efficiency and experience enablement, I'm going to talk about the journey what we took a year and a half back when ChatGPT, OpenAI sparkled the eyes of everyone over here that we are going to build out a Gen AI work. We also took that chart internally to our enterprise and said that how do we enable each one of us, be it Alex, be it Laura's, be it Aggies, everyone, right? No matter where they belong, no matter where they start their journey, and then equipping those 20 partners because everyone has their own seasoned approach of doing things, and the world divided itself into three buckets. You know what were those three buckets? There were companies who were thinking of, I am going to put up Gen AI into my learning product or a platform as an interface. Interface where my tutors at large, my students at large will start interacting with my product. Second were the users who were thinking of, no, I'm not going to allow Gen AI to represent my product enterprise and put something over here which I'm not later on. So those users who are thinking of, let me use AI to bring operational efficiency into my product design and build. Some of you were thinking translations. Some of you were thinking, how do we go actually and make the product assembly processes simple? And that being said, that was second bucket of users. And third bucket of users was like, how do I actually enable my operational enterprise, like my marketing team, my sales team, and everyone in the larger group to get equipped through AI and then get some results. That being said, while this ecosystem was building together, trust me, there were companies which were emerging out on building tools. There were companies which were emerging out on talking of data. and there were companies which were talking about, doing measurements. All these things coming together, eventually the industry was looking at how do we trust, how do we actually, create that transparency to who we are approving on the AI and who is going to be part of our future state enterprise education ecosystem. Today, I welcome my guests, Mike Campbell and Joshua McGhee. Mike happens to be representing many companies at large, like Pearson, Follett, on advisory and innovation research. And same way, Joshua McGhee, one of my guests over here today is representing one at Tech. He's working as a technical program manager and guiding many of the AI initiatives. Mike, why don't I let you allow to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Michael Campbell. I am the president of Advancing Global Edu. Like what you said, I have worked at several of the large publishers, but most recently I have been involved in consulting and sales, marketing, strategy, and research, helping companies grow their companies both here in the U.S. and globally. So that's really what I've been working on in the last 7 years or so. Josh?
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Joshua McGhee. My road here is actually quite a winding one, to be completely honest. I'm a graduate of Rutgers, right across the river in New Jersey. I was a third grade teacher. I taught in a charter school in Newark, New Jersey. I went to school at Rutgers in New Jersey. Did that for 6 months and decided I hate this. Ironic. It had nothing to do with the kids, love working with the kids, but anybody who's worked in any type of school knows sometimes it's a little challenging dealing with your coworkers, with the state, or anything. I was 21, 22 at the time. It wasn't great. So I ended up getting into corporate IT and integration building, and I worked in telecom for about 10 years, a couple of blocks away from here, building integrations between our software as a service and Verizon and big markets. Until I got an opportunity to join an organization called Enablement, which I'd never heard of before. But when the pitch came to me about what they did and who they are, I was like, yeah, that's something I really like to be involved in. It makes the work I'm doing a bit less faceless. So I serve as a technical program manager. What that means basically is some mix of project manager, product manager, and marketing manager. We're a relatively small organization. And I've overseen a bunch of our work. And, right now I have focus in some of our practice standards, which I'm sure I'll mention again, as well as One Roster, which is a standard that I mentioned a little bit earlier, which is SIS integration standard. I've also worked in LTI, which many people have heard. So,
Thank you, Josh. Thank you, Mike. So, as Magic has the charter to become an outsourcing services provider for all of you sitting over here, and we have more responsibility over here to broker the conversation between the industry, consultants, and then how you are drawing out your roadmap as you lead into the future. Today, we will actually enter into few Mentimeter polls over here so that all of you learn from each one of you at the table that where are people into this whole journey, right? I want you to see that maturity level of passion. Right. So your into question is, have you implemented a self-assessment process to evaluate internal procedures concerning AI procurement, data governance, and risk management? We have some good observations over here. So many of you say that it's still under development. Many of you say no, not currently a priority. But what I would like to address over here, and we'll take that question through to our guest panel over here. then how do we bring standardization over here to what you are assessing for yourself? How do you make it navigable across your consumers, across the buying behaviors, across your enterprise? Then how do you relate to what does the self-assessment means? And we will jump onto this and take this as a discussion topic with Josh and Mike. Can we move on to the next question all the way? So what are the primary concerns your organization faces in adopting AI? And those of you mentioned that you don't have any assessment done so far. You can mention anything that you feel like, is it data security you are thinking of? Is it interoperability with existing systems? Are you worried about AI generated hallucination or errors? Or many times you can even say that we have limited knowledge on AI. And I tell you, those of you who say that we know all in AI, I learn it every day. From the time OpenAI was announced, you would have seen how many times you have heard new things out over there, right? New releases, new evolution. It's not OpenAI across the providers. In fact, we at Magic today are seeing a new cloud-enabled Gen AI world, right? It's not the seasoned cloud. It's literally Gen AI-enabled cloud. And we're talking of a lot of things happening out there. So it's absolutely fine if we have limited knowledge and we want to go and take a pride in talking to a partner out there and saying, where are you into this journey? And let's go to our last panel out over here. And what is the most transformative AI use case you would like to explore given the opportunity in operation? And this is more geared towards learning experience enablement, and we are talking about personalized learning and recommendation systems, which is more of AI-based observations, getting to see where the users are. Second is around measurements, it's automated assessments. Third is around intelligent content creation, which is equivalent to either you're building a learning product or you're building messaging around your products. How do you see AI in representing the content? And finally, in more of applied learning skills like simulations, games, and other interactive content, where you create several opportunities of thinking and reflections. You're not just stating that, hey, I launched a program and it sits into the market, but then you want to actually see the measures out over there where the program metrics could inform you what you have built, how efficacy is built into it. So we have some good results out over here. So I will move with my guest panel out over here to just learn out. I'll go to you, Josh, first. Given this whole evolution happening in the AI space, and if you see this whole mix of audience out over here representing K-12, higher ed, institutions at large, universities, how do you see, what are the kind of observations you are making out from the community at large at Monetech, and where are you seeing the gaps?
Yes, so there's a couple of interesting things happening there. And sort of to set the context for it, about a year and a half ago now, we released at the behest of our community, which is about 1,000 organizations split between those different silos, right? So institutions, suppliers, K-12, right? We were told, hey, you need to get something out there in front of the industry talking about AI. You're a trusted voice. We need to hear you at the same time. So we brought together very small people and put something out. It's out there for everybody to use. Since then, we brought together sort of the larger community and get everybody involved in discussing what does the market need from a standards body when talking about AI. And, we had met for about 6 months and we produced a charter that we're going to turn into a full specification rubric. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. However, but to your question, we saw a whole bunch of different perspectives coming from a whole bunch of different levels of education and knowledge. So I was the one running that group. We had about 50 people, 50 organizations represented in it, from people who are instructional designers, whose biggest challenge is that their teachers don't know how to handle the students who did their assignment using ChatGPT, all the way to suppliers who are like, well, we already had AI and language models built into our products. our customers didn't know, and now they're freaking out, right? So we have this entire gap of what are the challenges, who are the levels, what are the things we're trying to address. And sort of the magic of the One Ed Tech community is that we have the ability to bring together all of these voices and sort of synthesize and collaborate.
Like, what do you think, when this need was being observed, when this gap was being observed, what are you hearing from the market? Where do you find those gaps?
So I think Joshua is correct in that we see every day that the gamut of people who are at the 10,000 foot level and people who are at the, I'm in there every single day using ChatGPT, asking them, how I should do my strategy, how I should do all those kinds of things. And I think that is the dilemma that we find is that the people at the 10,000 foot level don't necessarily understand the people that are in it on a day-to-day basis, and they have some reticence about this. So there's no consistent strategy. So when I probably 70% of the work that I do is in K-12, 30% is in higher ed. When I work in K-12, I could be in one district or the next district. There's no consistency. And so I think that's the biggest issue. If we had some consistency and people talk the same language across the board, and Joshua and I have been talking about this, is that if people talk the same language at 10,000 foot level and at the technology level, that would help tremendously.
Anecdotal data here. We work a lot with higher ed institutions, and we'll have different departments from institutions represented for different things. And you'd be shocked, or maybe not because it's educators and people in the space, but there will be for example, the anthropology division. They'll know all about AI, and then you go and talk to the administrators and they know nothing. So even in organizations across boundary lines, there's a huge gap in knowledge.
So how do you relate to my first question over here on doing a self-assessment? I believe many of the respondents over here mentioned that they are midway into their self-assessment. Many of them are not clear. Many of them are actually started. I believe many of the individuals sitting over here might have practiced ChatGPT, either also knowing it, I'll be trying it once, and then see what it means to them. But when it comes to self-assessment, can you describe what and how that self-assessment generally means?
Yeah. So One Ed Tech has historically been about writing technical interoperability standards, right? That's sort of what we're known for. However, as the community has grown and we've brought in more business people, more construction, the sort of gamut of topics that we cover has widened. And so we've introduced this kind of segment of our work that we call practice standards, right? They're not specifically interoperability standards, but they're defining best practices and giving you specific items that you should be doing to account for this. And then the most important piece of that, like Michael alluded to, is what standards at large do, is create a shared language for everybody, right? And so what One Ed Tech has done in the AI space is, as I mentioned, we published a set of, I think it was 6 questions that are for suppliers to answer, to give to their institutional customers, that help the institutions understand that organization's stance with regards to AI, its plans, and how it will be used with their data, right? Because the big concern that I see from institutional members is, well, all this stuff is great, and I hear about it, and I see it, and my kid is using ChatGPT to understand what photosynthesis is. Well, what are they going to do with my data? And so One Ed Tech gets to serve as that sort of trusted authority to bring together all of these voices, foster collaboration that is constructive, and build out a set of self-assessments that suppliers should do to inform their customers, their institutions of how what their stance is, how they're approaching AI, where it's being used, what their data is, and what is being done with their data.
And what you're seeing is the small disclosure and transparency is then informed by an artifact where one can actually go and see how AI is being used. Is that correct?
Correct, yes. So in line with how we've handled our privacy and security work in the same sort of vein is suppliers will take the self-assessment and we will publish it on our website as part of their profile on the OneEdTech website. So if you were, for example, to go and look at instructors page on our website, big LMS in the US, and you'll see they are certified for this set of interoperability standards, and here is their stance with regards to the security and how they've answered everything. Here's their privacy and how they've answered everything, and as well we'll be doing AI. How they answer everything.
That's very good. Then Mike, does that create an opportunity space over here for the audience over here? Because I see the audience literally in two groups over here. One are people who might be building products and they might be, leveraging AI into their design and build process. They might be very curious to know that which AI is being used, which AI model is being used, right? How is that data from that model being captured? Is that I'm reading it correctly?
Yeah, I think so. So whether you're, a big data, user or provider, or whether you're a workforce development person, or whether you're or a content person, LMS provider, everybody is using that interoperability somehow or another in between that. And if you don't think that your data is being used that way, it is. And so everybody should think about that and how AI is, your data is being used one way or another. So I think that's really, Richie, is what we really want to know, how your AI is being used on a day-to-day basis.
And I believe everyone over here that you all be responsible citizens over here as you process user data using AI, and you have your own knowledge bases. You want to see how it is being processed and where it is being stored, and you want to put that transparency with your consumer at large, right? So for the institutions at large who are inviting publishers or edtech companies to offer their tools, they would definitely be curious that what AI is being used, how it is being used. And for suppliers, it's an opportunity space for you, right? How do you acquire that market? How you unseat a partner who is not doing it today? So to me, OneEdTech, we have an opportunity to work with them. In fact, I have been working very closely with Joshua onto that AI rubric. My view is if any of you over here has not got close to that AI rubric and have not opportunity to speak to it, talk to it, you can reach out to Joshua, you can talk to Mike, you can talk to me. We can not only get you equipped, but we can shorten the journey of getting your product there. I just want people to raise hands over here, like people who are aware to this AI rubric, people who are not aware to this AI rubric and are interested to explore more. Just raise a hand and I can do my observation over here. Are you having awareness about OneEdTech AI rubric? Great. So majority of people we need to propagate it over here, right? So we will definitely see how we can bring you to speed in the next couple of weeks. Another important piece over here is when we talk about adoption challenges, and we noticed there are various adoption challenges which were showed out there. One was around data privacy concerns. They were around trained workforce. I'll tell you, between last 2 years, we have actually prepared around 100 plus people on AI. And digitally, what is happening is people don't pick one technology to develop their learning platform and learning products. We talk about back-end technologies, we talk about front-end technologies, we talk about how the data is being stored. I can tell you the talent marketplace is today highly dominated with demand. And the demand is coming around people who are equipped with AI. And it needs that hands-on reasoning, because if you don't have enough use cases, and if you relate to my example of use cases, people who have experience in building personalized learning tools, people who have experience with cut-shorting the process of that whole design and build. I'll put the question to Mike over here. Mike, in the whole learning agent, right? Which company, which product comes to your mind where a conversational tool could have been highly instrumental, being a learning agent and enabling the learning agent?
Well, if you look at some of the examples that are out there, Josh has put together example on the table here. We have, I think there's some examples here, several that he's put together, Joshua has put together, some learning examples that you can scan and look at there. So these are some very good examples of learning agents out there that you can take a look at. We have learning experiences that are easily used out there that are great examples that you can look at. But on the AI side, you think about the learning experiences, you think about administrative tasks that are used on those. And then the other thing I think that we talked about today are predictive analysis that are really going to help students learn, because for both on the university side and the colleges side, as well as on the K-12 side, really student outcomes are so important these days. And so that's really what's going to be important for anything that's out there, and for the success of those solutions that are designed. And I know that Rishi's team, as they design these and work with you and your team, that's what they're really looking for, is helping you find the solutions that will help student outcomes. So they're looking at the efficacy that goes along with those. And I think that that's ultimately what we've all got to look at these days, because schools, and with budgets that are out there, that's they don't have the COVID money like they did before.
This is helpful. And what I would tell you from my experience, all the samples which are lying on your table all the way here, there are much more beyond that. If you talk about experience enablement and efficacy is not just limited to learning excellence. Efficacy is also enabling people at large. In the morning session, we had a session around inclusion, right? We talk about how do we bring people at large. Trust me, for the 20 partners we helped, they were all looking for making all these materials inclusive. Opportunities to create artifacts, opportunities to actually have contain more structure. How do they announce headings? How do they announce content interaction? Right. We also heard Deb Siri, right, over here talking of how the simulation world was always being looked at budget intensive and people were not taking initiatives. I've come across many partners in the past, right? And those of you who have Pearson, those of you who understand, Jonathan can tell us it's a serious issue when you want to design a product. You see at the full wavelength of your product design, right? You want to design a product where it has parity across the life cycle of the product. You don't want to just take one image of Eiffel Tower and make it interactive and say, hey, I've done justice to my job. You want to carry it across the curriculum, across the grade level, and saying, my reason to do it digital is very different. And those reasons happen to be, I want that digital to be immersive. I want it to be talking to me where the user is, how the user can be uplifted into the learning life cycle. And then you can do those comparisons, before and after, which we use oftentimes to describe three kinds of efficacies. One could be the instructional efficacy. Second could be the learning efficacy, which is actually, from what is the learner background? How do they actually absorb this instruction? And then third final one is the teaching efficacy, which is very important. You might have a great instruction, you might have a great student, but if the teaching strategy is not applied to the advice pedagogy, you might end up losing the interest of the student. So again, talking back to that whole educational ecosystem, I also talk about how do you actually have these metrics feeded in, and again go back to Joshua over here, because it's not just the AI rubric. We have to make sure that what we are designing through AI, it is transparent, it has trust built into it, and it is interoperable. We talk to the rest of the world where the data is getting mined into one digital warehouse. So we talk about the credentialing where you are actually citing out what the individual achievement is and how that achievement can make that learner to an earner, right, in the product spectrum. So, Josh, do you want to talk about the interoperability framework over here and how that gets related?
So, I wanted to talk a little bit about some of what you said and then dovetail into the second topic, but A lot of the discussions that we want to have around AI tooling, does this work? Is it good for education? Get shortcutted by get shortcutted by organizations that don't have the correct expertise. And so things like the AI data rubric or interoperability standard, to get back to that trust idea, they help build trust. They help foster the creation of a shared language. Anecdotally, just something I hear all the time in my day to day. One roster was a game changer. I asked why was one roster a game changer? Well, it made it so that a conversation that I used to have that would take 3 weeks now takes 30 minutes. I hear that all the time. And so what the AI data rubric does is it shortcuts the conversations of here's exactly what my application does with data for this, and this. And now let's talk about how this tool helps you, how it helps improve learning outcomes, how it improves teacher efficiency and efficacy, right? It lets us get to the conversations that we think that matter because we get the shortcut based on a shared language and trust.
Mike, would you like to add some more, Michael?
Yeah, so I think you're exactly right because, when I go into schools these days, the trust issue is big because you have certain people who, got their hands up immediately and take care of the word AI come up immediately. And what they don't realize is that they've been using AI for years and years. When I first started teaching, way back in the 90s, they were already using AI. And so, what we have to do is help. I think this consistency in language would help a lot at the administrative level and at the industry level. If we did a lot of that, that would help tremendously. So having things like this transparent rubric would help tremendously on all sides. Because a lot of districts, a lot of universities and colleges go into making these decisions in a very somewhat haphazard way of making decisions on some of their technology decisions instead of having a very clear decision-making way. And I think that if they spend their money in a very different way, they can have it. And most of you who are in sales and marketing understand exactly what I'm talking about because times have changed and no longer can you make some of these very multi-million-dollar decisions with a handshake and a slap on the back. You really have to make smart decisions to get the product and the kind of products that you want.
I want to unpack one small thing you said in there a little bit because one of the aha moments that happened in the task force we put together to do the data rubric was some of the institutional people saying things like, wait, there's AI in the thing that I didn't see. There was like light bulb moment for them. To them, that demystified the idea of that AI is just this thing you go and talk to when you want to know the photosynthesis. I'm going to keep going back to that. It's such a good example. To understand that it was just a technology that helps things move forward. And, the ability to bring together people at those different understanding levels and help uplift the entire market has been very powerful from having these conversations.
That being said, I do have access to the AI data but over here. Those of you don't have access to it, you can scan it and take it from here. Another important aspect is it's not just about one attack. Across the industry, there are new standards, new frameworks being involved, and content authenticity initiative is another one where we talk about the media gets related. Now, if you've seen companies like Adobe, what they are talking of, and we heard in one of the prior session, is how you're generating images, if those images can be copyrighted, and how you actually pick up the claim around an asset with respect to this asset is being designed by this vendor. This asset actually has these titles, these definitions, these formats, here's how it has been used. So those are literally evolving over here. So the product definition today is, not limited to just the instruction at large. It also goes with all the artifacts which assemble that instruction together. And that's how, it's our duty as Magic to actually inform you around that, how the product can leverage AI into different kind of level. So that being said, I will open the floor over here for questions. Again, you can ask any question. We can go from one desk to another. Definitely, if you have any questions, please feel free to voice those over.
So, as I see earlier this year, Google is basically sort of flying a flag saying that we're going to be, we're going to win the war that you have in one way. We're going to be on the board for the first operating system. We won the board for the first 1.5 years. But we're going to win this one. So, take that in mind. This huge giant Google sort of building what they believe this AI space should be for education. How do all these interoperability centers that are being built? I mean, is Google coming to you and saying, hey, we want to bring this platform, or are they just doing that for May or we're just going to do our own thing, sort of?
Mostly the former, a little of the latter, because of so if you were to go and look on One EdTech directory about Google, they're certified for LTI, which is our big tool connector specification, One Roster, which that's what it says it is. And so they have been an active and engaged participant within the One EdTech community since I've been here, and I've been with One EdTech now for a little under 7 years, and they've always been engaged. Now, of course, along with some of that is they use their weight. We are a community-based organization. Communities with resources will come and sometimes say, hey, we're going to do this thing. And then what happens is we have communities we have groups that come together and discuss that. And so while they will influence and they will make their voice heard, they are not, when in those conversations, what is the final say.
Any more questions?
I'd also like to make a quick short call. Our friend over here also participates in an accessibility group that we've done. So it's not just AI, it's not just security. We try to bridge that gap between suppliers and industry and the institutions for the things that matter to our members.
Gordon.
Areas we're trying to make that shared language and certain topics that different companies or maybe K-12 versus higher ed are coming to.
Yeah, so there's a couple of different things in here, right? So I sort of touched on this and alluded to it a little bit earlier. For the K-12 people, it really is a lack of fundamental understanding on the thing. And, that's not going to be 100% consistent across the board. And the sort of adoption curve of emerging technology vis-a-vis K-12 space is all over the place, right? But on the K-12 side, you often see people who don't understand some fundamental things about AI, how it works, what it's used for. On the higher ed side, it's more about, well, okay, we understand we've probably been doing things for this for a number of years, right? However, now we have this huge problem because in the higher ed space, there's all this retention issues and accreditation issues. And so what they're worried about is people shortcutting the higher ed experience and or cheating. Right? So those are some of the topics in that. And then from the supplier perspective, touching back on the point I had made earlier, it's like before this became common language, part of the zeitgeist, they didn't have to talk about it, right? And so they could talk about their product specifically from the perspective of their product, not my product has AI and does this. And so for them, sort of uncovering and unearthing the pieces of their application that use AI for certain things has been, not necessarily a challenge, but it's a point.
And I would add to that, budget is always an issue too.
That's a good thing what Mike and Joshua mentioned. So standardization actually helps you control your cost. And then it also allows you to, take a peek into that transparency. Because transparency is to something what you can relate to it, people can relate to it, everyone can relate to it, right? So if you don't have standardization, your work will be very local and siloed. If you have that verbatim which everyone could relate to, your trust will actually go high, right? I'm seeing more questions out here. None of you have asked questions around cost efficiency, budgets. I was speaking to Andrew yesterday, right? And oftentimes there are opportunities which you want to exercise, but then those budgets come out. Any questions around that?
I mean, the biggest thing right now for us like when we talk about budget and AI is different scales and licenses, and results based on the quality of license, right? Different duration of checks. You can take 2 years back model is going to produce different results than more modern ones. So it's for at least for us right now, it's like figuring out kind of cost benefit analysis, right? Like how much money can we spend on AI to still return on investment, right?
So the good part is like when we all, let's say that we are using chat, many of you will say we are using Claude, many of you will say, we are actually in a Google Gemini space. My learning and my advice out here to every one of you is like today, it's like cloud agnostic or AI agnostic infrastructure, right? If you are operating still with that whole silo way of going on to either one of the seasoned cloud providers and then allowing them to dictate your future state journey, that's not the world today. I believe the efficiencies come from when you hire a new employee, what do? You actually, first of all, teach the person around your organizational processes. You also take reflections upon what they have been as learning to their new job, right? And then you merge the both and then see what kind of outcomes get processed out of it. So what Magic has been doing, we are implementing custom LLMs for each and every enterprise. And that LLM can be used by any of your vendor partners because as long as you have control over the LLM, you can actually put guardrails onto it saying who is using it, how they are using it, what context they are building upon, and what context you want to draw upon from them. And ultimately, it's like kind of a new colleague you hire, and you are equipping them with the knowledge yourself over there, right? So those of you who have not actually embraced AI to that line and length, and you are still worried about how the standardization, how the trust, how the responsible AI framework will come into place, my all is to you. Welcome you all. Reach out to any of my colleagues out over here. You have access to our account relationship. You have access to the advisors and the constant bodies out over here. We are all over here to help you out. So we are all learning, and I do want to say that you are great people. You are connected with us, but it's our responsibility to uplift you and your learning right over here. Thank you all.